Hold on. It's coming up. I'll send the link to you now. Some of you cannot keep quiet. You will just see, you find something to be talking about. That is the live stream link. Have you seen it now?
Yes, I think it's okay now.
So we go back. So, like I was saying, variation is the tendency of offspring to vary from their parents. So, in other words, no offspring can look or can be similar 100% to their parents. There is bound to be similar. Even the so-called identical twins. The so-called identical twins, they are not 100% identical. So there are similarities between them and there are equally differences between them. So we don't say genetics is still a relatively young branch, but because of more and more discoveries in the areas of genetics, so we can say that genetics has not been really or has not been deeply explored because new things are still coming up every now and then. I said earlier, Gregor Mendel started the work of genetics, and there are other branches of genetics like cytogenetics, molecular genetics, phylogenetics, developmental genetics, behavioral genetics, and on like that. Gregor Mendel worked on a plant called Pisum sativum. It's a legume, and it's a picture of it, and the arrangement of seeds in the pod is being shown by the side. Who asked you to be telling? When you have a question, just raise up your hand. I will answer you. I'm using the tool. I've sent the new YouTube link as well. Check your WhatsApp. So, to give more insight into who Gregor Mendel was, Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk who discovered the basic principles of heredity through experiments in his monastery's garden. He was a monk who restricted himself into the monastery, dedicated his life to the service of his creator. But while he was there, there are plants in the monastery. The Pisum sativum was there. So the plant has some characters which fascinated Gregor Mendel. So he was paying attention and was observing the plants. Okay. And from his observation, as he was doing that, he was recording his observation, and he came up with what today is known as laws of heredity, which was propounded by Mendel. But like I said, when he was doing all this, they thought it was not normal. How can you be working on the plants that you don't eat and you are just doing that? Not knowing that it was laying the foundation for what will become a whole field of genetics today. He died on January 6, 1884 at the age of 61. So these are what I've said. So he published his work because when he was observing, he was recording. So based on his observation, he wrote an article which he published in the Proceedings of the Natural History Society. And the title of his publication is Experiments in Plant Hybridization. Of course, it was a German, so the book was published in German, but later on translated into English. So you can see Mendel died as an unrecognized man. Nobody recognized him when he was alive. And his studies remained in dark for 34 whole years. 34 whole years before somebody now, came up with another idea and found out that his work will help. And they now went back to his work, which now laid the foundation of genetics. The recovery of Mendel's original work, okay, in 1900 was done by three eminent scientists. We have Carl Coren, Hugo de Vries, and Erich von Schamann. Carl Coren was a German. Hugo de Vries came from Holland. Then Erich von Schamann was a fellow Austrian, like Mendel. So his work today is now what is known as Mendelism, or Mendelian laws of inheritance. Mendelian laws of inheritance. So in genetics, there are principles guiding the field. Okay, there are the rules of standards governing the biological phenomena of heredity. What are the standards? Then the transmission of characters from parents to offspring. How is it transmitted? Okay, it was found out that it was transmitted through the genes, and the genes is made up of DNA, which encoded biochemical information. The DNA that made up the genes encode biochemical information. Aburimen. So you are raising up your hand. You also done. I ask for questions. Now we are moving on to the definition of some key terms. There are some key words or register word you use in genetics, okay, which when it is used, you know what they are talking about. Now we have the words or terminology. The first one is the gene. Okay, I've told you during Gregor Mendel's life, they didn't know the field as genetics. But because somebody coined out what Mendel was referring to as factors, they now coined out the name as genes that are responsible for the transmission of traits. So William Bateson in 1905 now coined that field as genetics. So let's start. The gene. The term gene was coined by Johansen in 1909, and it is the hereditary determining factor. Some tests, they will tell you it is the basic unit of heredity. It is a unit that is responsible for the transmission of traits. A gene consists of a continuous segment of DNA. So genes are made up of DNA, and they are found on chromosome. So that's another terminology that we talk about. So in eukaryotes, the gene occupies specific position on the chromosome. Okay, and where you find a gene on the chromosome is called a locus. So when you have many genes on the chromosome, so you refer to all their position on the chromosome as loci. So look at the picture here. This is a typical chromosome, enlarged one for that matter. Okay, and it's made up of DNA, which encodes the information in the gene. Now, another terminology is allele, which is the shortened form of allelomorphs. Allelomorphs. Alleles are alternative forms of a gene which occupy identical loci on homologous chromosome. Now, according to Mendel, a gene has two alleles. So you now call the allele the alternative forms, because if a gene is responsible for a trait, let's say a trait is height. Height is a trait. Okay, when you now measure the height of individual, you find out that some people are tall. Okay, some are taller. Some could be said to be the tallest. The same way you have short, shorter, and shortest on the other hand. So that means if somebody is tall, that gene, okay, has two ways of being expressed. The two ways of expressing the traits are being responsible for by allele. So one allele will be responsible for maybe tallness. The other allele will be responsible for dwarfness. So if somebody inherits allele for tallness, the individual will be tall. If somebody inherits the allele for shortness or dwarfness, the individual will be dwarf. Okay, the one is said to be dominant, the other is said to be recessive. That is Mendelian. Mind my words. In this class that we'll be talking of genetics, we will restrict ourselves to Mendelian inheritance. What Mendel found out When you now move on into higher genetics, you begin to see, okay, some other things that are not really in consonant with Mendelian inheritance. But to this class, we will restrict ourselves to Mendel. So, according to Mendel, a gene has two alleles, one dominant, one recessive. So, and the two are responsible for a trait. You know, height, for instance, is a trait. And there are ways or two ways of expressing height. You can either be tall or short. So that means one allele in that gene is responsible for tallness, the other allele is responsible for shortness or dwarfness. So whichever one that is inherited. But when you now have, anyway, when we get to recessiveness and dominance, we see. So alleles generally are two alternative forms of a gene, and they control the contrasting characters of the same traits. You can see that they control the contrasting characters of the same trait. So same trait, height is the same trait, but contrasting character of height could be tall and could be dwarf. So, and they usually exist in two different forms. That is according to Mendel. So two different forms, that means dominant allele and recessive allele. This diagram here is showing the diagram of homologous chromosomes. That is chromosomes that are the same morphologically in terms of their height and the composition of genes on them. So look at them. So this is homologue of this one. So when the allele for purple flower is on this, that same region on the homologue must contain the contrasting allele of that same color. You know, when we are talking of purple flower, purple is a color. And when we talk about white, white is equally a color. So that means the color now, which is a trait, same trait, is being controlled by contrasting allele, one for purple and one for white. And they are found on the same location. Look at where purple is found on this chromosome. That same region of the homologue is where the white color allele is found. So these two are said to be homologous pair of chromosomes. So homologous pair of chromosomes is another terminology which shows the two chromosomes are identical in size, in morphology, and in composition of genes on them. So we have seen dominant and recessive allele here. We now want to define what is dominant and recessive will mean, even when I've described it. Dominant allele will always be expressed, whereas recessive allele will only be expressed in the absence of dominant allele. Like I said, for height, okay, according to Mendel, on the plant he worked on, he found out that height could be expressed in two ways. Look at below. Okay, so dominant will always be expressed even with the recessive allele together, it will dominate it. Whereas recessive allele will only express when the dominant allele is absent. In other words, dominant allele mask or suppress the expression of recessive allele. It only suppresses it. Mind you, it is still there, but it suppresses its expression. That is why it can be expressed in subsequent generations. Capital letters and recessive alleles are symbolized with small letters. For instance, the traits. A trait is height, as I've said. Then the characters that can express same trait. One can be tall and can be dwarf. So the one that is the allele in the gene controlling height One of them is dominant, which is for tallness, and is being indicated by capital T. The other one is recessive, which is for dwarf, and is being represented by small letter T. So when you see this, the letters alone will tell you which one is dominant and which one is recessive, because they said dominant alleles are symbolized with capital letters, recessive alleles are symbolized by small letters. That is Mendel. Now, another one is genotype and phenotype. Genotype and phenotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup or constitution of an organism. So when we are talking of genotype, it has to do with the genetic makeup of that organism. So out of this genetic makeup, there are those that are expressed and those that are not expressed, but they are still part of the genetic makeup of that individual. So, but for phenotype, the phenotype are only the expressed, traits or characters of the individual. So it's not just physical features or appearance of an organism. When you say physical features, that shows once you see the individual, the organism, you can see, oh, in terms of height, you are tall. In terms of skin complexion, you are fair. You begin to state the express traits based on what you can see on an individual. But there are some phenotypes that you can't see in the individual, but they are equally phenotype. They are expressed. Example is blood type. You cannot look at individual and say, oh, your blood type is A or your blood type is B. That one you have to carry out a test. But it's expressed in the individual, and that is why your blood group is your blood group. From birth to the end, you can't change it. So that means that is an expressed trait in you. That's your blood group. So phenotypes are not just physical features. They are also physiological features that you cannot see, but they are expressed. So phenotype is equally the expression of genotype, what genetic makeup you have. Okay? But genotype will tell us whether you are homozygous or heterozygous for a trait. So phenotype, which is the physical or physiological feature, is not just by the interaction of genes. Okay? Its expression is equally under the influence of environment. There are environmental factors that influence the expression of phenotype. That's why you may have two individuals may have inherited capital T, that's for tallness. And when you measure their height, they are not going to be the same height. But they are both tall. You can't say one is a dwarf. They are both tall. But why is it that they cannot be of the same height? That is the influence of the environmental factors. That's the influence. And the same way, when identical twin is born, and you raise one of them in Nigeria and you take one to maybe America or London, after some years, you now bring the two back. Of course, you will think they are brothers, not twins, because one is likely to be, huge, well fed, and than the other. So that is the influence of the environment. Even when you inherited a genotype, the environment will still play its factor for its role for the expression of such phenotype. So look at again in phenotype and genotype, we take a trait as height, and the phenotype that we can see, physical or physiological, it can be tall or dwarf. So we can see that, oh, this individual is tall. Oh, this individual is tall, is dwarf. When an individual is tall, the genotype will be 2. That means 2 alleles for height. I mean, one allele is capital T and the other is small t. So in both cases, the individual will be tall. So when you have the 2,
you guys mute yourself now. You are disturbing the class.
who is the person? I'm going to send her out now. If it's not complying,
You guys should mute yourselves now.
don't worry. Sorry, let me just fish that. I'm sending her out of this class. But the individual is not even interested in the class. So why is something not that? I'm interested.
Sir.
Yeah. Yes.
We have another class now, sir.
Is it 8? I mean, is it 9 already?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Now, okay. We ran.
Continue, sir, please.
I should continue.
Yes, sir.
Now.
We have class now.
We have class, sir.
They have not sent the link.
Please slide.
Our class has started. Our chemistry class has started. It's live already.
So, I will end it up here. So the phenotype can be tall or dwarf, but the genotype can be any of these 3. So when an individual is tall, there are 2 possibilities for the genotype, capital TT or capital T small t. But there is only one possibility for the individual that is dwarf, because the 2 alleles there are recessive. And then when they are together, recessive traits will be expressed. Unlike when one is dominant over. So this individual capital T small t will equally be tall, because the capital T will be expressed. It will dominate the small t. So let's stop it for today. And you can see the illustration, the flower, the plants. That's for physical. Do we have time on Wednesday that we can still meet?
Yes, sir.
For everybody, for all the departments?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Huh?
There is always 8 to 9 Wednesdays.
I think is it convenient for everybody?
Yes,
It's
for
a
biology.
scheduled class.
It's for biology.
Okay, and everybody has keyed into it.
Yes, sir.
All right. We will see again on Wednesday. Quickly, who has a question to ask? Anybody with a question to ask? So if there's no question, we will meet again on Wednesday by God's grace. All right? Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.